Today, I'm going to tell you about one of the most intense rescue operations I ever participated in during my 25 years of service. A mission that tested every ounce of training, brotherhood, and sheer determination we had. Operation Sandstorm Rescue, a 72-hour nightmare that almost went completely sideways. Don't click away from this video, because I'm going to walk you through every single detail of this operation. And trust me, you won't believe how this one played out. Every day on this channel, I bring you real military stories from my quarter-century of service as a Sergeant Major in the United States Army. Stories that showcase the reality of what we do, the brotherhood we share, and the sacrifices we make. Before we dive into this one, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new military story, and drop a comment below. I read every single one of them. It was October 2009, and I was stationed at Forward Operating Base Chapman in eastern Afghanistan. The Hindu Kush Mountains stretched endlessly around us, their jagged peaks cutting through the morning sky like broken glass. We'd been in country for about 6 months, and by then you develop this sixth sense about when things are about to go south. That morning, I felt it in my gut. Alpha Squad, led by Staff Sergeant Mike Rodriguez, had been out on what should have been a routine reconnaissance patrol. Their mission was simple: check out some suspicious activity reported by locals near a village about 15 clicks northeast of our position. Intel suggested possible Taliban weapon caches, nothing we hadn't dealt with 100 times before. Rodriguez was solid, one of those NCOs you'd trust with your life without hesitation. His team consisted of Specialist Jake Morrison, our comms guy, Corporal Tommy Chen, our medic, and Private First Class Danny Walsh, fresh out of infantry school, but eager as hell. They rolled out at 0530 hours in 2 up-armored Humvees, standard loadout, with expected return before noon, radio check every 30 minutes by the book. Everything was running smooth until around 0815, when Morrison's voice crackled through our comms with increasing concern. "Base, this is Alpha 1. We've got eyes on the target village, but something doesn't feel right. Too quiet. No civilians, no livestock, nothing moving. Request permission to maintain observation position and delay entry." I was in the TOC, Tactical Operations Center, when that transmission came through. Captain Sarah Mitchell, our company commander, was running the show that morning. She was tough as nails, West Point grad who'd earned her stripes the hard way. She looked at me with that expression that said she was thinking the same thing I was. This smelled like a setup. "Alpha 1, this is base. Permission granted. Maintain overwatch and report any changes. Stay frosty." That was the last normal transmission we received from them. 30 minutes later, silence. No radio check. Morrison was religious about his comms. Never missed a scheduled contact. Captain Mitchell tried raising them 3 times with no response. The hair on the back of my neck was standing up. Alpha 1, this is base. Radio check, over." Static. Alpha 1, respond immediately. This is base. More static. Then finally, a burst transmission barely audible through what sounded like heavy interference. Base, Alpha 1, taking effective fire, multiple coordinates. Then nothing. Complete radio silence. Captain Mitchell looked at me across the TOC, and I could see the decision forming in her eyes before she even spoke. "Sergeant Major Harris, I need you to put together a rescue package. Fast." Within 15 minutes, I had my team assembled in the briefing room. These weren't just soldiers, they were my brothers. Sergeant First Class Mark Thompson, my assistant team leader, had been with me through 2 previous deployments. The man was like a Swiss watch, precise, reliable, and tougher than a $2 steak. Staff Sergeant Lisa Reeves, our intelligence specialist, could read a situation faster than anyone I'd ever served with. She had this ability to connect dots that others missed. Corporal David Bulldog Martinez was our heavy weapons specialist. The guy could make an M249 saw sing like Beethoven, and his tactical awareness was off the charts. Then there was Specialist Kevin Brooks, our explosive ordnance disposal expert. Young, but with hands steadier than a surgeon's when it came to dealing with IEDs and booby traps. "Here's what we know," I began, pointing to the map spread across the briefing table. "Alpha Squad went dark approximately 45 minutes ago near grid coordinates 842156. Last transmission indicated they were taking fire from multiple directions. Weather station is reporting a massive sandstorm system moving in from the northwest. Visibility could drop to near zero within the next 6 hours." I could see the gravity of the situation registering on their faces. A sandstorm in that region wasn't just bad weather. It was a complete game changer. It would ground our air support, compromise our communications, and turn navigation into a nightmare. "Sir," Thompson spoke up, "what's our timeline looking like?" "Intel suggests if they've been captured, enemy forces will likely move them within 72 hours. That storm system is going to last at least 3 days. If we don't get to them before they're relocated, we might never find them." Staff Sergeant Reeves was studying satellite imagery on her laptop. "Sergeant Major, I'm seeing unusual heat signatures in this area." She pointed to a cluster of buildings about 2 clicks northeast of Alpha Squad's last known position. "Could be cooking fires, but the pattern suggests more people than a normal village would have." "Good eye, Reeves. That's probably where they're being held." I turned to the whole team. "Listen up, people. This is going to be one of the toughest operations we've ever undertaken. We're going in with limited visibility, no air support once that storm hits, and we're going to be operating in hostile territory for an extended period. But those are our boys out there, and we don't leave anyone behind." The room was silent except for the distant hum of generators and the occasional radio chatter from other operations. These moments before a high-stakes mission always carried this strange mixture of anticipation and dread. You run through contingencies, check your gear obsessively, and try not to think too hard about all the things that could go wrong. "Equipment check," I continued. "We're taking NVGs, extra batteries, GPS units, primary and backup, storm masks, goggles, everything sealed against sand infiltration, medical supplies for potential casualties. Martinez, you're carrying the SAW plus extra ammo. Brooks, full EOD kit. I have a feeling we're going to encounter some surprises along the way." Corporal Martinez nodded grimly. "Roger that, Sergeant Major. How many hostiles are we expecting?" "Unknown. Could be anywhere from a small cell to a reinforced company. We plan for the worst, hope for the best." I folded the map and looked each of them in the eye. "One more thing. Once that storm hits, we're essentially on our own. Radio communications will be sporadic at best. We stick together, we watch each other's backs, and we bring our people home." As we headed to the armory to gear up, I couldn't shake the feeling that this mission was going to test us in ways we hadn't been tested before. The weather alone would make it a nightmare, but add in unknown enemy strength, unfamiliar terrain, and the pressure of time running out, and you've got a recipe for chaos. The armory was buzzing with controlled urgency. We drew our primary weapons, M4 carbines with ASIOGI scopes, backup pistols, night vision equipment, and enough ammunition to fight a small war. I watched my team methodically checking each piece of gear, their professionalism evident in every movement. This is what 20-plus years of military training produces. Soldiers who can function at peak efficiency even when the stakes couldn't be higher. Outside, I could see the sky beginning to change. What had been a clear morning was now showing signs of the approaching storm. The wind was picking up, and there was this strange, ominous quality to the light. In the distance, you could make out what looked like a brown wall stretching across the horizon. "Sergeant Major," Specialist Brooks approached me as I was loading magazines. My wife's gonna have our first baby next month. I just want you to know that whatever happens out there, it's been an honor serving with you." I put my hand on his shoulder. "Brooks, you're gonna be there for that baby's birth. We all are. We go out together, we come back together. That's how this works." But even as I said the words, I knew we were about to face something that would push every one of us to our absolute limits. The storm was coming, our brothers were in trouble, and time was running out fast. We mounted up in 2 MRAPs, mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles, at 1400 hours. The sky had turned this sickly yellow-brown color, and the wind was already starting to howl like something out of a horror movie. I took the lead vehicle with Thompson and Martinez, while Reeves and Brooks followed in the second vehicle. Our convoy moved out of the fob gates with what might have been the last clear visibility we'd see for days. The first 10 kilometers went smooth enough. We were following a known route through relatively secure terrain, but you could feel the storm building behind us like some massive predator stalking its prey. The radio crackled with weather updates that kept getting worse. "All units, this is base weather. Storm front has accelerated. Estimated arrival time now 16:30 hours. Sustained winds 40+ knots with gusts up to 70. Visibility dropping to less than 50 meters. All aircraft grounded until further notice." Thompson looked at me from the passenger seat. "Cutting it close, Sergeant Major. Story of our lives, Thompson." I keyed the radio. "Vehicle 2, how's our navigation looking back there?" Reeves' voice came back steady and professional. "GPS is solid for now, but I'm tracking some interference patterns. Could get sketchy once we hit the worst of it." The landscape around us was typical Afghan countryside. Rocky, barren, with scattered compounds and villages connected by dirt roads that were barely more than goat paths. Every rise in terrain could hide an ambush. Every building could house enemy fighters. After enough deployments, you develop this constant state of alertness that becomes second nature. Around 15 kilometers out, we started hitting the outer bands of the storm. The wind was rocking our 7-ton vehicles like they were toys, and visibility dropped from clear to maybe 100 meters in the space of 10 minutes. Sand began pelting the windshield with this constant rattling sound that got inside your head. "Jesus," Martinez muttered from the gunner's position. "I've been through sandstorms before, but nothing like this. I'd seen my share of bad weather in Iraq and Afghanistan, but this was different. The storm had this almost supernatural quality, like the desert itself was trying to swallow us whole. Our headlights barely penetrated more than 20 feet ahead, and the GPS started showing those little hiccups that make your stomach drop. "Base, this is Rescue 1. I radioed back to the fob. "We're 15 clicks out and hitting heavy weather. Communications may become sporadic." "Roger, Rescue 1. Last intel update. No change in Alpha Squad status. Maintain mission." That was the last clear transmission we received from base for the next 18 hours. By 1600 hours, we were operating in what amounted to a brownout condition. Visibility was down to maybe 30 meters, and the wind was hitting us in these violent gusts that would actually slide the MRAP sideways on the road. Thompson was navigating by dead reckoning and GPS, but even the satellite signal was starting to get interference from all the atmospheric disturbance. "Vehicle 2, sound off," I called on the radio. Static, then Reeves's voice, barely audible through the interference. "Still with you, 1. Brooks is monitoring our 6. No contacts so far." The terrain was getting rougher as we approached the area where Alpha Squad had gone missing. We were climbing into foothills now, following a winding dirt track that seemed to disappear and reappear in the swirling sand. Every few minutes, Thompson would have to stop and confirm our position because landmarks were completely obscured. Around 1700 hours, we encountered our first real problem. The track we'd been following simply vanished into a wadi, a dry riverbed that hadn't shown up on our maps. The storm had erased all the visual references we'd been counting on, and the GPS was now showing a margin of error that could put us anywhere within a half-kilometer radius. "Dismount and recon," I ordered. "Martinez, stay on the gun. Everybody else, let's figure out where the hell we are." Stepping outside the MRAP was like walking into a blast furnace filled with sandpaper. The wind hit you with physical force, and breathing required conscious effort through storm masks that immediately clogged with fine sand. Visibility was down to maybe 15 feet. You could barely see your own hand extended at arm's length. Thompson and I moved forward, while Reeves worked on getting a better GPS fix. The sand was getting into everything: weapons, radios, eyes, despite all our protective gear. This is the kind of environment that breaks equipment and kills batteries, turning sophisticated military technology into expensive paperweights. "Sergeant Major," Thompson's voice was muffled by his mask, "I think I see vehicle tracks heading northeast. Could be recent." I moved up to his position, squinting through my goggles. Sure enough, there were tire impressions in the sand, partially filled but still visible. They looked like they could be from military vehicles, and they were heading in the general direction of where we expected to find Alpha Squad's last known position. Good eye, let's follow them. We remounted and continued northeast, using the faint vehicle tracks as our guide. The storm was getting worse by the hour. What had started as difficult driving conditions was becoming nearly impossible. Sand was finding its way into every piece of equipment despite our best efforts at protection. Around 1900 hours, Martinez spotted something through his thermal scope. Movement, 2 o'clock, approximately 200 meters. I grabbed my binoculars and tried to get a visual, but the thermal signature was the only way to see anything in these conditions. "What have you got?" "Looks like 3 individuals moving on foot. Could be locals, could be hostiles. The rules of engagement in this situation were clear. Positive identification before engaging. But in these conditions, positive ID was nearly impossible until you were practically on top of someone." We continued moving, keeping the contacts under observation. As we got closer, the thermal signatures resolved into what appeared to be 3 men in traditional Afghan clothing, moving with purpose despite the storm conditions. That was actually suspicious in itself. No sane civilian would be out in weather like this unless they had a very good reason. "They're armed," Martinez reported. "I can see weapon shapes on thermal." In this region, armed men weren't necessarily hostile. Lots of civilians carried weapons for protection, but their movement pattern suggested they weren't just trying to get home before the storm got worse. They were moving tactically, using terrain features for concealment even in near-zero visibility. "Decision time," Thompson said quietly. I weighed our options. We could try to avoid contact and continue toward the objective, but these men might be part of the same group holding Alpha Squad. We could attempt to detain them for questioning, but that would slow us down and potentially compromise our mission. Or we could eliminate them if they posed a direct threat, but that carried its own risks. The decision was made for us when one of the figures raised what was clearly an AK-47 and fired in our general direction. The muzzle flash was visible even through the storm, and I heard the distinctive crack of rifle rounds passing overhead. "Contact!" Martinez was already returning fire with the saw, the familiar chatter of the M249 cutting through the wind noise. 3 hostiles, 200 meters northeast. "Vehicle 2, we have contact." I radioed to Reeves and Brooks. "Move to support by fire position." The engagement lasted maybe 90 seconds, but it felt like an hour. Visibility was so poor that we were essentially firing at muzzle flashes and thermal signatures. Martinez laid down, suppressing fire, while Thompson maneuvered to get a better angle. The hostiles seemed to know the terrain well, using what little cover was available. When the firing stopped, we found 2 enemy KIA and evidence that a third had escaped wounded based on blood trails in the sand. More importantly, we found something that made my blood run cold. One of them was carrying an American military-issue radio, the same type used by Alpha Squad. "Son of a bitch," Thompson muttered, examining the radio. "This confirms they got our guys." I keyed my radio to try reaching base, but got nothing but static. The storm had completely cut us off from outside support. We were on our own now, operating in enemy territory with no backup and a ticking clock. "Reeves, get over here," I called to the second vehicle. "I need you to look at something." She came running through the sand, bent almost double against the wind. When she saw the radio, her expression went grim. "Sergeant Major, this is definitely Alpha Squad's equipment. Serial numbers match our unit designation." The implications were clear. Alpha Squad had been captured, their equipment stripped, and we were getting close to wherever they were being held. But we'd also announced our presence to anyone in the area. The element of surprise was probably gone. "How far to the target area?" I asked. "Best estimate, maybe 3 kilometers northeast. But in these conditions," she gestured at the wall of swirling sand around us, "we could walk right past it and never know." I made the call that would define the rest of this operation. "We continue on foot from here. Vehicles are too loud, too visible on thermal." We cached them and moved to the objective area on foot. The look on their faces told me they understood what this meant. We were abandoning our mobile protection and heading into unknown hostile territory during a sandstorm that could last for days. If something went wrong, we'd have no quick escape route, no heavy weapons platform, no radio contact with base. But somewhere out there in that howling nightmare, 4 American soldiers were counting on us to bring them home. And that's exactly what we were going to do, storm or no storm. Stay with me. What happened next in this operation is going to surprise you in ways you can't imagine. We cached the vehicles behind a rocky outcrop that provided some concealment from both visual and thermal detection. The process took longer than I'd hoped because everything had to be done by feel. You couldn't see more than a few feet in any direction. Thompson and I covered the MRAPs with camouflage netting and sand, while the others prepared for the foot movement. Moving on foot through a sandstorm is like being inside a living hell. Every step is a struggle against wind that tries to knock you flat. Sand that stings exposed skin like angry wasps, and disorientation that makes you question which way is up. We formed a tight file formation, each person maintaining physical contact with the man in front. It was the only way to stay together. I took point, following the compass heading that should lead us toward the target area. Behind me was Thompson, then Martinez carrying that saw like it weighed nothing, followed by Reeves with her intel gear, and Brooks bringing up the rear with the EOD kit. Every 20 meters, we'd stop and conduct a listening halt, trying to pick up any sounds that might indicate enemy activity or, hopefully, signs of Alpha Squad. The landscape was completely alien in the storm. Rock formations that would normally be obvious landmarks disappeared into the swirling brown void. Wadis and ravines opened up without warning, forcing us to detour around obstacles we couldn't see until we were right on top of them. The GPS was virtually useless now, too much atmospheric interference for reliable satellite contact. After about an hour of movement, Reeves grabbed my shoulder and leaned close to my ear. "Sergeant Major, I'm picking up some electronic signatures on my equipment. Could be communications gear, maybe surveillance equipment." I signaled for the team to take a knee while she worked with her specialized detection gear. The device looked like a ruggedized tablet computer designed to identify electronic emissions from radios, cell phones, or other communication devices. In this environment, any electronic signature probably meant human activity. "Distance and direction," I whispered back. "Hard to tell precisely in these conditions, but northeast, maybe 500 to 800 meters. The signal strength suggests multiple devices, possibly a communication hub or command post." This was promising. A communication hub meant people, and people in this area during a sandstorm probably weren't innocent civilians. It could very well be where Alpha Squad was being held. We adjusted our heading and continued the approach. The terrain was getting more challenging. We were climbing now, following what seemed to be an old goat path up the side of a ridge. The rocks provided some protection from the wind, but they also created dangerous blind spots where enemy sentries could be positioned. Martinez suddenly held up a closed fist, the universal signal to freeze. We all dropped to the ground, weapons ready. Through the storm noise, I could hear what had caught his attention, voices speaking in what sounded like Pashto. They were close, maybe 50 meters ahead, but invisible in the swirling sand. I crawled forward to get a better listen. The voices seemed to be coming from a depression in the rocks, probably a natural shelter. There were at least 3 different speakers, and their tone suggested they were relaxed, not expecting trouble. That was about to change. 10 signals passed down the line. Enemy positions identified. Prepare for close assault. In these visibility conditions, we'd have to get within spitting distance before we could positively identify targets. The margin for error was essentially 0. Thompson moved to my left flank, while Martinez established a support by fire position with the saw. Reeves and Brooks would provide rear security and be ready to move forward once we cleared the immediate threat. The plan was simple. Get close enough to determine if these were hostiles, and if so, neutralize them quickly and quietly. Moving the final 50 meters took nearly 20 minutes. Every step had to be carefully placed to avoid loose rocks that might give away our position. The wind actually helped us by masking any small noises we made, but it also made it impossible to hear exactly where the voices were coming from. I got within about 15 meters before I could make out the details through my night vision goggles. 3 men in traditional Afghan dress, sitting around what appeared to be a small electronic device, probably a radio. 2 AK-47s were visible, leaning against the rocks within easy reach. More importantly, I could see what looked like American military equipment scattered around their position. A helmet, what might have been body armor, and definitely some kind of military radio gear. The confirmation I needed came when one of them held up what was clearly an American military dog tag, examining it in the dim light from their radio display. These weren't innocent civilians caught in a storm. These were enemy fighters, and they had equipment from Alpha Squad. I signaled Thompson with the plan, simultaneous assault from 2 directions. We'd move on my signal, close with the targets before they could react, and secure them for interrogation. In this weather, gunfire might not be heard very far, but we couldn't take the chance of alerting anyone else in the area. 3, 2, 1, execute. We came at them like ghosts emerging from the storm. Thompson appeared on their left flank while I approached from directly in front. The first hostile went for his weapon, and Thompson dropped him with 2 quick shots to the chest. The second man tried to run, and I tackled him before he made it 10 feet. The third threw his hands up in surrender. "Reeves, Brooks, move up," I called. "We need interrogation support." The prisoner was a young man, maybe early 20s, terrified and babbling in rapid Pashto. Reeves, who spoke functional Pashto from her intelligence training, knelt down beside him while I searched the area for intelligence materials. "He says he doesn't know anything about American prisoners," Reeves translated. "Claims they just found this equipment." "Bullshit," I replied, holding up the dog tag. "This belongs to Specialist Morrison from Alpha Squad. Ask him where the Americans are being held." The interrogation went on for several minutes, with the prisoner becoming increasingly cooperative as the reality of his situation sank in. Finally, he broke down and started talking rapidly, pointing northeast toward higher ground. "Sergeant Major," Reeves looked up at me with a mixture of relief and concern. "He says there's a compound about 2 kilometers northeast of here, built into the rocks. Says 4 Americans are being held there, heavily guarded." "How many guards?" More rapid conversation in Pashto. "He's not sure. Maybe 15 to 20 fighters. Says they're expecting to move the prisoners tomorrow when the storm clears." This was exactly what we'd feared. A tight timeline with superior enemy numbers. But at least now we knew where our guys were and had a rough idea of what we were up against. "What else?" I pressed. "The compound has multiple levels built into natural caves. The prisoners are being held in the lowest level. He says there are sentries posted even during the storm." I studied the tactical situation. 2 kilometers through this terrain in storm conditions would take us at least 2 hours. Dawn was still several hours away, which meant we'd be conducting the assault in darkness and weather that would make coordination extremely difficult. But waiting for the storm to clear wasn't an option. They'd move Alpha Squad, and we'd lose them. "Brooks, how are you fixed for breaching charges?" "I've got enough C4 to blow a hole in whatever they've got, Sergeant Major. Just point me at it." "Martinez, how's your ammunition status?" 600 rounds for the saw, plus personal ammo. I can keep their heads down for a while. I made the decision that would define the rest of this mission. We continue to the objective. Thompson, take point. Reeves, you're with the prisoner. He's our guide now. Martinez, you've got rear security. Brooks, stay ready with those charges. As we prepared to move out, the prisoner said something else to Reeves that made her face go pale. "What?" I demanded. "He says one of the Americans is badly wounded, shot during the initial contact. Says he might not survive much longer without medical attention." The stakes had just gotten higher. Not only did we need to rescue Alpha Squad, but we were now racing against time to save a wounded comrade. In my 25 years of military service, I'd learned that when a mission goes from difficult to seemingly impossible, that's when you find out what you and your team are really made of. We moved out into the storm, heading toward what could very well be a suicide mission. But those were our brothers up there, and there was no force on Earth that was going to stop us from bringing them home. Now I want you to leave a comment below about what you think is going to happen when we reach that compound. Do you think we'll be able to pull off this rescue against those odds? Let me know your thoughts, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more real military stories from my years of service. The movement to the target compound was the longest 2 hours of my military career. Every step through that howling nightmare tested our physical and mental endurance to the breaking point. The prisoner, who told us his name was Hassan, led us through terrain that seemed designed to kill anyone stupid enough to be out in conditions like this. We followed what Hassan claimed was an old smuggler's route, winding through rocky defiles and across exposed ridgelines where the wind hit us with the force of a freight train. The sand was getting into everything despite our protective gear. Weapons actions, radio equipment, even our water supplies. This is the kind of environment that turns professional soldiers into casualties through simple equipment failure. About halfway to the objective, we ran into our first major obstacle. Hassan led us to the edge of what should have been a simple ravine crossing, but the storm had turned it into a raging torrent of sand and debris. Flash flooding from sudden precipitation, changes during the storm had created a temporary river where none should have existed. "Son of a bitch," Thompson muttered, staring at the brown water churning through the ravine. "How deep you think that is?" I found a stick and probed the edge. The current grabbed it immediately and swept it downstream. Deep enough to drown us if we're not careful, and cold enough to cause hypothermia in these wind conditions. Reeves was checking her map and GPS. "Sergeant Major, the next crossing point is about 1 kilometer south, but that takes us way off our approach route." Time was becoming critical. Every minute we delayed was another minute that Alpha Squad remained in enemy hands, another minute closer to when they might be moved to an unknown location. But attempting to cross here could result in losing team members to the flood, effectively ending the mission. "We cross here," I decided. "Rope line, one at a time. Brooks, you're our lightest. You go first and establish the anchor point on the far side." The crossing took 20 precious minutes. Brooks made it across on his second attempt after the current nearly swept him away the first time. The rest of us followed, each crossing requiring multiple attempts as the storm continued to intensify. By the time we reached the far side, we were all soaked, exhausted, and dangerously cold. But we pressed on. Hassan continued to guide us through the maze of rocks and ravines, and slowly the electronic signatures on Reeves' detection equipment grew stronger. We were getting close. Around 0200 hours, Hassan held up his hand and pointed ahead. Through the swirling sand, I could make out what looked like the mouth of a cave system built into the face of a limestone cliff. The compound wasn't a traditional building. It was a fortress carved into the living rock, virtually invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Smart, Thompson whispered. Natural concealment, multiple levels, probably multiple escape routes. I studied the approach through my night vision goggles. Even in the storm, I could see the faint heat signatures of sentries posted at different levels of the compound. Hassan hadn't been lying about the security. This place was definitely occupied and defended. Reeves moved up beside me with her electronic detection gear. I'm reading multiple communication sources, Sergeant Major. Looks like they've got a significant command and control set up in there. Any indication of where the prisoners might be? Hassan said the lowest level, but I can't confirm that from here. We're going to have to get inside to locate them. I called the team into a tight huddle for final planning. The wind provided excellent noise discipline. We could barely hear each other at arm's length, which meant enemy sentries wouldn't be able to hear our preparations. Here's how we play this, I began. Hassan says there's a service entrance about 50 meters to the north, probably used for bringing in supplies. Brooks, that's your target for breaching. Thompson and Martinez, you'll create a diversion at the main entrance to draw attention away from our breach point. Reeves and I will go in through the service entrance with Brooks and locate the prisoners. Martinez shifted the saw to a more comfortable position. How long do you want us to keep their attention? Give us 15 minutes to get inside and locate Alpha Squad, then shift to the extraction route and provide covering fire for our withdrawal. Brooks checked his demolition kit one more time. What if the service entrance is more heavily fortified than Hassan indicated? Then you blow it anyway. Speed and violence of action. We hit them fast and hard before they can organize a response. As we prepared to split up for the assault, I couldn't help but think about the odds we were facing. 4 exhausted soldiers operating in the worst weather conditions I'd ever experienced, about to assault a fortified position held by an unknown number of enemy fighters. By any rational calculation, we should have called for backup, waited for better conditions, or found some other approach. But rational calculation goes out the window when your brothers are in trouble. That's something you learn in the military that civilians sometimes have trouble understanding. There are things more important than personal safety, more important than following the safest course of action. Sometimes you do what needs to be done, regardless of the odds. Thompson and Martinez moved off toward the main entrance, while Brooks, Reeves, Hassan, and I worked our way around to the north side of the compound. The service entrance turned out to be a heavy wooden door set into the rock face, probably reinforced with metal plates. It looked formidable, but Brooks examined it with the professional eye of an explosives expert. "I can blow it," he whispered, "but it's going to be loud, and it's going to bring everyone running." "How long until Thompson and Martinez start their diversion?" Reeves checked her watch. 3 minutes. Right on schedule, we heard the chatter of Martinez's saw echoing off the canyon walls, followed by the distinctive sound of AK-47 return fire. The diversion was working. I could hear shouting from inside the compound as defenders rushed toward the main entrance. "Now!" I hissed to Brooks. He placed his charges with practiced efficiency, and we all took cover behind nearby rocks. The explosion was tremendous, even muffled by the storm. When the smoke cleared, there was a gaping hole where the service entrance used to be. Go, go, go! We rushed through the breach into a narrow corridor carved from solid rock. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the walls, and I could hear confused shouting from other parts of the compound. The diversion was still drawing their attention, but that wouldn't last long. The corridor led deeper into the complex, branching off into multiple passageways. Hassan pointed down a stairway that descended into darkness. "Americans down there," he whispered urgently. The lower level was a maze of natural caves connected by man-made tunnels. We moved carefully, clearing each chamber before advancing to the next. The sounds of fighting from above were growing more intense. Thompson and Martinez were definitely keeping the defenders busy, but I knew they couldn't hold out indefinitely against superior numbers. 3 chambers down, we found them. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was unconscious, blood seeping through makeshift bandages on his chest and shoulder. Specialist Morrison was trying to tend to him with limited medical supplies, while Corporal Chen and Private Walsh were secured with zip ties, but appeared relatively uninjured. "Jesus Christ, am I glad to see you guys," Morrison whispered as we cut their restraints. "Rodriguez took 2 rounds during the initial contact. He's in bad shape, Sergeant Major." I knelt beside Rodriguez and checked his pulse. Weak but steady, the wounds looked serious but not immediately life-threatening if we could get him proper medical attention. Chen, our medic, immediately took over his care while Brooks and Reeves established security. "Can he be moved?" I asked Chen. "He needs a hospital, but yeah, we can move him. I'll need someone to help carry him out." The sound of gunfire from above was intensifying. Our diversion was running out of time, and pretty soon the entire compound would be searching for us. "Hassan," I called to our prisoner, "is there another way out of here?" He nodded rapidly and pointed to a passage I hadn't noticed before. "Tunnel leads to canyon behind compound. Very narrow, very dangerous, but possible. Better than trying to fight our way back through the main complex." Thompson's voice crackled through my radio. "Sergeant Major, we're taking heavy fire up here. Whatever you're gonna do, do it fast." I made the call. "We take the tunnel. Morrison, you and Walsh help Chen carry Rodriguez. Brooks, you've got point with Hassan. Reeves, rear security." As we started down the narrow tunnel, carrying our wounded comrade through passages barely wide enough for one person, I couldn't help but think that this was either going to be a brilliant escape or a spectacular way to get everyone killed. But we'd found Alpha Squad, we'd gotten them out of immediate danger, and now we had to trust in our training, our teamwork, and maybe a little luck to get everyone home alive. Make sure you subscribe to this channel because you definitely don't want to miss how this rescue operation ends. Hit that like button if you're enjoying this story, and let me know in the comments what you think about the tactical decisions we made. Also, check out the materials I've pinned in the first comment below. They'll give you more insight into real military operations and tactics. The escape tunnel was a nightmare. Picture crawling through a space barely wide enough for your shoulders, carrying a wounded man, with the sound of enemy fighters searching for you echoing through the rock above your head. The tunnel walls were rough limestone that tore at our uniforms and equipment, and water was seeping through cracks in the ceiling, making everything slippery and treacherous. Rodriguez was drifting in and out of consciousness, which was both a blessing and a problem. A blessing because he wasn't feeling the pain of being dragged through this hellhole, but a problem because we had to be extra careful not to aggravate his injuries. Chen was doing his best to monitor Rodriguez's condition while helping carry him, but in these confined spaces, proper medical care was impossible. Hassan led us through what seemed like an endless maze of natural passages and man-made tunnels. Some sections required us to belly crawl for 20 or 30 meters at a time, pushing our gear ahead of us. Other areas opened up into small chambers where we could rest briefly and check our wounded. "How much farther?" I whispered to Hassan during one of these stops. "Maybe 200 meters more," he replied, but his voice carried uncertainty. Been a long time since I used this route. That wasn't exactly reassuring, but we didn't have much choice. Behind us, I could hear the sound of pursuit, enemy voices echoing through the tunnels, flashlight beams bouncing off the walls. They'd found our entry point and were following us into the underground maze. Brooks, who was bringing up the rear, reported back, "Contact behind us, maybe 50 meters. At least 3 individuals moving slow but definitely tracking us." The tunnel started to angle upward, which gave me hope we were approaching the exit. But the climbing made carrying Rodriguez even more difficult, and our progress slowed to a crawl. Every minute that passed allowed our pursuers to get closer. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 minutes, Hassan pointed ahead. "Exit there. Opens onto canyon floor, behind compound." The tunnel mouth was partially concealed by fallen rocks and scrub brush. Brooks moved forward to clear the obstruction, while I tried to raise Thompson and Martinez on the radio. Thunder 6, this is Thunder 1. Do you copy?" Static, then Thompson's voice, strained and urgent. "Thunder 1, we're taking heavy contact at the main entrance. Running low on ammo. What's your status?" "We have Alpha Squad and are exiting through the back door. Can you break contact and move to extraction point Bravo?" "Roger. Moving now, but we've got company coming your way. Saw several hostiles moving around the north side of the compound." "Perfect." We were about to exit the tunnel into what might be an occupied area with wounded personnel and limited ammunition. But staying in the tunnel wasn't an option either. Our pursuers were getting closer by the minute. Brooks finished clearing the exit and peered outside. "Storm still raging, visibility near 0. I don't see any immediate threats, but that doesn't mean much in these conditions." "We go now," I decided. "Fast movement to the rally point. Chen, Morrison, you've got Rodriguez. Walsh, you're with them providing security. Brooks and Reeves, you're with me establishing overwatch." We emerged from the tunnel into the full fury of the storm. If anything, the weather had gotten worse during our time underground. The wind was howling like a banshee, and sand was flying horizontally with enough force to strip paint. But that same storm that made movement so difficult also provided perfect concealment from enemy observation. Our extraction point was a rocky outcrop about 500 meters from the compound, where we'd planned to link up with Thompson and Martinez before moving back to our cached vehicles. The terrain between the tunnel exit and the rally point was relatively open ground, dangerous under normal circumstances, but in this storm, we were essentially invisible beyond 20 meters. We moved in a modified diamond formation, with me on point, Brooks and Reeves on the flanks, and the Alpha Squad recovery team in the center. Progress was slow because Rodriguez needed to be carried, but we maintained good security and stayed oriented on our heading. About halfway to the rally point, Hassan suddenly grabbed my arm and pointed northeast. Through the storm, I could make out muzzle flashes. Someone was firing automatic weapons in our general direction, but the shots were going wide. Either they couldn't see us, or they were just firing blindly, hoping to get lucky. "Contact northeast!" I called back to the team. "Keep moving. Don't return fire unless directly engaged." The muzzle flashes continued for about 30 seconds, then stopped. Whoever was shooting either lost sight of us or ran out of ammunition. We kept moving toward the extraction point, but now I knew there were hostiles in the area actively hunting for us. My radio crackled with Thompson's voice. "Thunder 1, we're at extraction point Bravo. Where are you?" "About 200 meters southeast of your position. Coming to you now." "Roger. Be advised, we've got movement all around us. Looks like they're conducting a sweep to try and find us." We pushed harder toward the rally point. And finally, I could make out Thompson and Martinez's heat signatures through my night vision. They'd found good defensive positions among the rocks and had fields of fire covering multiple approach routes. "Thunder 6, this is Thunder 1, I called as we approached. "We're coming in from your 6 o'clock. "Roger, I have visual." The reunion was brief, but emotional. Thompson and Martinez were both wounded. Nothing serious, but they'd taken some shrapnel from grenades during the firefight at the main entrance. More importantly, they were down to their last few magazines of ammunition. "How's Rodriguez?" Thompson asked as Chen continued working on our wounded man. "He's stable, but he needs a hospital. We need to get him back to base ASAP." "What about Hassan?" Martinez indicated our prisoner, who was sitting quietly under guard. I looked at the young Afghan man who'd guided us through the tunnel system and probably saved all our lives. By all rights, he was an enemy combatant who'd been part of the group that captured Alpha Squad, but he'd also helped us rescue them when he could have led us into an ambush. "Hassan," I said in my limited Pashto, "you helped us. Why?" He looked at me for a long moment, then replied in broken English, "My brother killed by Taliban. They not good for my people. Americans sometimes not good, but Taliban worse." Whoa. It was a complex situation that illustrated everything complicated about the war we were fighting. But this wasn't the time for political philosophy. We had wounded personnel and needed to get back to friendly territory. "He comes with us," I decided. "He'll be processed through proper channels back at base." The movement back to our cached vehicles took 3 hours of brutal travel through continuing storm conditions. Rodriguez remained unconscious but stable, and Chen's field medical treatment was keeping him alive. Hassan continued to guide us, pointing out terrain features that helped us navigate in near-zero visibility. Thompson and Martinez, despite their own wounds, took turns helping carry Rodriguez when Chen and Morrison needed breaks. This is what 25 years of military service teaches you, that in the worst situations, ordinary people can do extraordinary things for each other. About a kilometer from our vehicle cache, we ran into one final challenge. A patrol of enemy fighters, maybe 6 or 7 men, was moving along the same route we needed to use. In the storm conditions, we almost walked right into each other before anyone realized what was happening. The engagement was brief but violent. Martinez, despite being wounded and exhausted, laid down accurate fire with the saw, while Thompson and I maneuvered to flank the enemy position. Brooks used his last demolition charge to collapse a section of rocky overhang, cutting off the enemy's escape route. When the shooting stopped, 3 hostiles were KIA, and the rest had scattered into the storm. We'd taken no additional casualties, but we were now down to our last few rounds of ammunition. If we encountered any more resistance, we'd be in serious trouble. The vehicles were exactly where we'd left them, covered but undisturbed. Getting Rodriguez loaded into the medical evacuation position took precious time, but Chen worked with professional efficiency to stabilize him for transport. Base, this is Rescue 1. I tried the radio as we prepared to move out. Do you copy? Static for a moment, then a clear signal. Rescue 1, this is base. We have been trying to reach you for hours. What's your status? Mission successful. We have Alpha Squad, 1 urgent medical, returning to base now. Request medical team standing by. Roger, Rescue 1, outstanding work. Medical team is standing by. Weather is clearing from the west. You should have better visibility on your return route. The drive back to FOB Chapman took 2 hours, and it was the longest 2 hours of the entire operation. Rodriguez was fighting for his life in the back of the MRAP, while Chen worked on him with whatever medical supplies we had available. The rest of Alpha Squad was exhausted but alive, and Hassan sat quietly under guard, probably wondering what his future held. As we approached the base, I could see the first hints of dawn breaking through the clearing storm clouds. The nightmare of the last 24 hours was finally coming to an end. Rodriguez was immediately rushed to the base medical facility, where the doctors worked for 6 hours to save his life. He pulled through, was evacuated to Germany for further treatment, and eventually made a full recovery. Today, he's retired from the army and teaching high school history in Texas. The rest of Alpha Squad recovered completely from their ordeal. Morrison was promoted to Staff Sergeant. Chen received a Bronze Star for his medical work during the operation, and Walsh went on to become one of the finest NCOs I ever served with. Hassan was processed through intelligence channels and eventually returned to his village after providing valuable information about Taliban operations in the region. I heard later that he'd become a local leader, working with coalition forces to improve security in his area. As for my rescue team, Thompson received the Silver Star for his leadership during the diversion operation. Martinez got a Purple Heart and Bronze Star for his actions despite being wounded. Reeves was promoted and went on to a successful career in military intelligence. Brooks completed EOD school and became one of the most respected explosive ordnance disposal experts in the Army. Looking back on Operation Sandstorm Rescue after all these years, I'm struck by how many things could have gone wrong. The weather, the enemy's strength, the terrain, the equipment failures. Any one of those factors could have turned a successful rescue into a catastrophic loss. But that's the thing about military service that I want people to understand. When everything goes wrong, when the odds are stacked against you, when any sane person would give up, that's when you find out what you and your teammates are really made of. That's when training takes over, when brotherhood means everything, and when ordinary people do extraordinary things. We didn't rescue Alpha Squad because we were heroes. We rescued them because they were our brothers, and you don't leave your brothers behind, ever. In 25 years of military service, I participated in dozens of operations, some successful, some not so much. But Operation Sandstorm Rescue stands out because it showed me that with the right people, the right training, and the right commitment to each other, there's no mission that can't be accomplished. That's the real lesson I want to leave you with today. Whether you're in the military or civilian life, whether you're facing a life-threatening situation or just dealing with everyday challenges, the principles are the same. Take care of your people, never give up, and always remember that together we can overcome anything. Thanks for staying with me through this whole story. If you enjoyed hearing about Operation Sandstorm Rescue, make sure to subscribe to this channel for more real military stories from my 25 years of service. Hit that like button if this story meant something to you, and leave a comment below telling me about a time when you had to overcome impossible odds. Remember, every day on this channel, I bring you real stories about real soldiers doing real things in some of the most challenging conditions on Earth. These aren't Hollywood fantasies. These are the actual experiences that shaped my life and the lives of thousands of other men and women who chose to serve their country. Until next time, this is Steve Harris reminding you that freedom isn't free, and it's defended every day by people willing to do whatever it takes to bring their brothers home. Stay strong, stay safe, and never forget that when things get tough, that's when you find out who you really are.